Good afternoon, everybody. We're here today because I'm taking action on legislation that both I understand as a parent and certainly every other parent in New Jersey will understand. Parents instinctively are protective of their children. I have four, and I understand this as well as anyone. Most of us as parents just get hardwired that way from the minute our child comes into the world. We never stop looking over our children, even as they get older. So I can only imagine the weight that protective instinct places on the parents of a child with a developmental disability, especially as that child enters adulthood. New Jersey has tried to help those families, along with initiatives that employ people with developmental disabilities. We have supported community-based residential programs, providing individuals with developmental disabilities the opportunity to live in the community in group homes, supervised apartments, or where appropriate, even independent living arrangements. But in doing so, we also have taken on an obligation to make certain those living arrangements are safe, caring environments. Stephen Caminos was a young man with a developmental disability who transitioned into a group home in New Jersey more than a decade ago. Tragically, he passed away there at the age of only 22. His family, naturally, is devastated. Today, I'm signing the bill named after him, taking action to ensure that other families do not have to endure the pain that his family continues to endure today. The law will further strengthen protections for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities and their families by requiring more state oversight and consistent supervision of community-based residential programs. This new law will, we hope, prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation of people with disabilities, establishing appropriately serious criminal penalties, and mandating drug testing of each and every staff member. This bipartisan effort balances the most effective, efficient protections with the interests of confidentiality and flexibility in an unbiased process of investigating potential abuses. I want to thank Stephen's father, Tom, the Senate President, and all of the other parents for providing invaluable input and cooperation to complete this measure and allow it to be signed into law today. As a result, the Department of Human Services is now required to make 2 unannounced visits annually to community-based residential programs, including group homes and supervised apartments, to see whether individuals are at risk of or subject to abuse, neglect, or exploitation of any kind. Providers of community-based residential programs and day programs also are required to notify the guardian or other family member of an individual with a developmental disability of an injury that occurs within 2 hours of the injury or 8 hours in extraordinary circumstances. We're also requiring DHS to send an employee to a developmental center or a community-based residential program within 48 hours of a report of moderate or major injury or abuse, neglect, or exploitation of any kind. In addition, there will be drug testing of direct care staff members at any programs, facilities, or living arrangements funded by the Division of Developmental Disabilities. Developmental centers will be expected to have meetings with parents twice a year and to increase involvement of the family of the resident in the day-to-day care of that resident. Employees of the center and programs also will be subject to increased criminal penalties for failure to report any abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Family members will be allowed to submit information to facilitate investigations, to attend interviews of individuals the guardian represents, and to terminate interviews. More importantly, DHS will have to notify guardians if an investigation results in a caregiver being placed on the Central Registry of Offenders against individuals with developmental disabilities. I know lots of people worked very hard to bring this bill to my desk. I'm proud to be a part of strengthening our commitment to protecting people with developmental disabilities while giving their families a greater say, and I hope along with that, a greater peace of mind for the well-being of their loved ones. This is never easy. The care of folks with developmental disabilities is a challenge, and we honor those people who commit their lives to providing that care. And so I don't want anybody in the community that provides this care to believe that what this bill represents is an indictment of them. It doesn't. They are folks who care deeply about the people that they care for and have made part of their career each and every day. This is to make sure that only the good ones get to do it. This is to make sure that our citizens who have developmental disabilities are not exposed to those who don't care, who aren't well trained, or are impaired in some way from giving those folks their very, very best every day. That's what we pay for. That's what we come to expect. And parents of these men and women should expect absolutely nothing less from us. And so hopefully this will lead to that today. I want to thank the folks in the legislature, because there were a lot of different folks who had a lot of input into this and who worked very, very hard to make sure that it got to my desk. I want to thank my staff who worked with members of the legislature to try to make sure that we crafted a bill that could be signed, not just something that was a symbol, but something that becomes part of the law. And with my signature, it has now become part of the law. And so I want to thank all the advocates who worked so hard to bring this matter to the attention of the people who represent you. And I want to thank the lawmakers in the legislature who took the time to have the hearings and the meetings to listen to the concerns of the parents, to make sure that this bill represented something that they could be proud of and could live with. And I want to thank my staff for doing the very same. And this is the way government is supposed to work at its best. It is always awful to experience the loss of any life. And so this does not remedy that. But hopefully what it does is what I said earlier, which is to prevent any other parents from having to go through the pain of that loss in the way that this family did. And if we do that, that won't ever justify the loss of Stephen's life. But what it will do, I think, is to give all of us a sense of pride that we were involved in the effort to make sure that another family didn't suffer the same way. So I thank everybody for being here, and I can take a few questions from the press, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, Governor. The requirements of the bill require more inspections, and I'm wondering, will you be hiring, will the Department of Human Services be hiring more folks to go out and do the inspections to keep up with the added demand?
Oh, they're now authorized to do so.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
Any sense of how much might be required, or what?
No, I want to leave that to the professionals to decide. I mean, that's quite frankly not something a governor should decide. We have Beth Connolly, who's, very, very good commissioner of the Department of Human Services, and she has a great staff with her. And so they now know what their responsibilities are. And what I've told them is, when I told them that I was going to be signing the bill, was that now it's your job to go and make sure that you follow the law. And if they need to make a request for supplemental funding to do that, I'm sure that the legislature would entertain that request from us if we need to do that. So they're out, making that. They've been making that evaluation because they knew I was going to sign the bill, and we knew that there was, just because of the way things worked at the end of the session, it got a little disorganized on some other topics. So we knew this wasn't probably going to get passed until now or even in November. So they've had time to already start to look at that. So I think this is something that'll get implemented more quickly than most, because we've had this lead time where I told them I was going to sign the bill, so they knew they had to start to prepare.
Governor, earlier in the week, you made some comments about the regional greenhouse gas initiative. You said that rejoining RGGI would cause utility bills to go up about $1 billion. I'm wondering how you arrived at that.
Based upon what RGGI is now suggesting as the increases that they want to make over the course of the next 10 years. The current RGGI states have made a proposal regarding how they want that to increase each and every year over the course of the next 10 years. And so that's how we come up with those numbers, and the DEP can back those up for you, specific year by year. But that's based upon the proposal that's now in front of the RGGI member states. And if we join, we're not going to be able to change that, because we're only one vote. And those folks have already moved towards that. So if you go to Ryan, go to DEP, and they'll give you the exact numbers year to year. But it could cost as much as $1 billion over the course of the next 10 years in increased utility bills on the people of the state. When we've already met our clean air goals for 2020. It makes no sense to me at all. This is a political thing. People like to use the phrase RGGI. All it is another tax. It is a tax on the people of New Jersey that is an unnecessary tax, we can meet our obligations to continue to meet clean air goals without this. This is just an ability to have environmental interest groups have more money to spend on their pet projects.
Follow-up, have you had conversations with the Lieutenant Governor to talk to her, about this, or?
She knows my position. She knows my position on it. She has a different position. It's okay. She's allowed. She's running for governor. Yeah.
Governor,
Christian.
earlier in the week on Monday, you said no new gun laws would stop the mass shootings like one in
Right.
Las Vegas. I understand now you're open to considering further.
Yeah, because that's not a gun law.
It's not a gun law?
No.
It's an accessory to a gun.
Right. It's an accessory. It's not a gun law. It's on bump stocks. That's not a gun. A bump stock is not a gun. Yeah. You don't understand that?
No, I mean, it's something that makes a gun shoot more bullets.
Right, it's not a gun law.
It's not a gun regulation nonetheless?
It's not an infringement on anybody's Second Amendment rights. What I said was I am not in favor of infringing any further on people's Second Amendment rights. They have no Second Amendment right to own a bump stock. I am pretty confident that James Madison and the rest of the crew were not considering bump stocks when they wrote the Second Amendment to the Constitution. And so as you already know, bump stocks are illegal to use in the state of New Jersey and have been. The only thing they're not illegal to do is own or purchase. If the legislature wants to come back to me in lame duck with a bill that says they can't be owned or purchased, I can't, depending on what the bill says, I can't imagine being opposed to that because you're not allowed to use them anyway. So what's the use of owning them or purchasing them if you can't use them? So that's not a gun law. It doesn't infringe on anybody's Second Amendment right.
Let me follow up. I was just at Phil Murphy's event and asked him to kind of opine on, why you may have taken this position on pump stock. He stuck his finger in the wind, I guess, to suggest.
Oh, well, no one's better at knowing what that's all about, is there? I've taken my positions on the Second Amendment during my time as governor fairly consistently. And so, I'm unlike Phil Murphy, I'm not running for anything. So I don't have to stick my finger in the wind for anything. So I don't know. It's just another indication of how really sophomoric he is. Because you stick your finger in the wind when you care which way the wind's blowing. Ladies and gentlemen, I got 102 days to go. I ain't worried about which way the wind's blowing anymore. I don't have to run for anything. I do what I think is right. That's what I've done for 8 years. So he could say whatever he wants to say. Literally, he should just focus on trying to get his campaign over the finish line. He's having enough trouble doing that in a state that's plus 15 Democrat. So he doesn't stop playing the games. He may wind up having to explain how he spent $25 million of his own money and lost.
Governor?
Yeah.
President Trump today, or his administration, announced that they were rolling back the requirements under the ACA for birth control coverage, and I wanted to...
I don't know anything about it. I've read it, and I don't know anything about it, so I can't comment on it.
I mean,
I don't know anything about it. I can't comment. You asked me the question, Sue. This is the answer. I haven't read it. The first I've heard of it is what you're just saying. So as much as I trust everything you say, I can't comment on something that I haven't read and I haven't looked at, so I don't know. Yeah, Dustin.
Governor, are you aware of any official announcements or notifications to the state about certain cities advancing for Amazon's new headquarters? Second headquarters?
I didn't quite get your question.
There was a report earlier in the week that I think 4 or 5 cities, Camden, Newark, New Brunswick, had advanced.
No, I think what the report was that 4 cities met the minimum requirements that Amazon had put forward to be considered, and that was Newark, Jersey City, Camden, and New Brunswick. I'll be getting a report next week from Michelle Brown and Melissa Orson. They've continued to review applications. My understanding is that those are the 4 cities that meet the minimum requirements set by Amazon to be considered for HQ2. But they're going to give me a full report. I think I meet with them next Tuesday or Wednesday. And I'll get a report from them there, and we intend to meet the deadline for the state submission, which I believe is October 19th. Christian.
Steve Sweeney yesterday said he wants to talk to you about maybe finding alternative funding sources for your opioid initiatives. He was upset that some of the money, I guess, for preschool and the developmental centers, not just schools, the developmental centers as well. Are you open to talking to him and finding some?
I talk to the Senate President on a regular basis about issues of mutual concern, And I'm always happy to talk to the Senate President whenever he wants to talk. But let's be really clear about this, okay? There were 143 school districts under the legislation passed by the legislature eligible for the $25 million. Because what they said was this was only money for expansion of currently existing state-funded preschool. That's 143 districts. Of that 143 districts, only 29 applied for the money. 29. 26 were fully funded for every dollar they asked for. 2 of them missed the mandatory meeting to discuss the money. Therefore, their applications were withdrawn. And the other remaining one withdrew their own application because they said they didn't have enough time to do what they needed to do. So every district which was eligible and applied was fully funded. I had a conversation with Senator Ruiz this morning and explained this to her, and now she understands and is no longer upset about it. You know, the fact is that, you know, they set the rules. It's expansion of current programs. And of 143 school districts that were eligible, only 29 applied. Now, my sense of why that is because the money didn't get authorized till the first week of July to expand current programs that were going to start in less than 2 months. And so school districts, most of the school districts, did not think they could responsibly expand, hire the personnel they would need, the classroom space and whatever, in that shorter period of time. So we funded every bit of what we were authorized to fund, and every school district that asked for the expansion got the full amount that they asked for. And that left us with $5.6 million left over. What were we supposed to do with that money? Add it to the surplus? I mean, you know, so we decided to do that. On developmental centers, we have cut the employees at developmental centers by 50% because we closed 2 developmental centers. Right? So, but we've continued to fund it at the same level. So they've continued to get increases in their funding, but even with those increases in the funding for the centers, with 2 fewer centers, and we've gone from about 2,400 employees to about 1,400 employees in developmental centers because of the closing of 2 of them, there's money left over from the appropriation. This year was about $3 million. Well, I have a choice to make. Either add that $3 million to the surplus or use it to try to establish programs that starts to quell the 1,900 deaths we had from opioid overdoses last year. I've chosen the latter. And by the way, let me remind you that the legislature could have decided to take $200 million from Horizon's $2.6 billion surplus, but decided that they wanted to be in the pockets of the insurance companies rather than serve the needs of the most needy in this state, which are poor, drug-addicted people. So I have very little sympathy for people who are now complaining and say they want to find some other way to fund it. They want to find some other way to fund it? Good. When the new governor comes in and you do your FY19 budget, find some other way to fund it. That's fine by me. But they gave me no funding for opioids expansion this time in the budget. Was not one of their priorities. Wasn't on their list of things to do. But they gave me the ability to be able to move funding from other lines, which I've done. But remember, that's only $70 million of the $200 million. $90 million we got because of the way we responsibly dealt with the lottery and the transfer of the lottery to the pensions, which lowered our projected borrowing costs by $90 million because we're better rated now in terms of our debt, and about $40 million or so in additional revenue that we got in FY17 that we didn't expect because the economy performed better than it did. So $130 million of the $200 million comes from sources that don't have an effect even theoretically on any program. But this had no effect on the pre-K program or on the developmental centers program.
Sweeney kind of suggested the surplus and said, you know.
Well, of course, the surplus, and then it'll lower our credit rating. I mean, listen, Democrats just want to spend more money and not make any choices as to where that money will come from. Yeah, just spend that out of the surplus. And if we lower the surplus, Christian, as you well know, that will affect our credit worthiness. I've worked too hard to try to battle back against all the mistakes of previous administrations in terms of not funding the pension, making promises like N over 55 and 25 and out, and unlimited raises for police and fire. I've been fighting against that now for 8 years. I'm certainly not on the way out the door going to spend money out of the surplus to make us less creditworthy when we just found $90 million to spend because the credit agencies found us more creditworthy. It's counterintuitive. So listen, they're all running for election. That's why they're saying this, because they don't want anybody to think that they wouldn't spend anything on anything that anybody wanted who might actually be showing up to vote in November. I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to do what's right, not what is politically expedient.
Governor, on the bill?
Community Dogma's tax plan, the debate is just a couple days away. Have you taken a look at the tax plan and do you property tax cut plan? And do you think it's viable?
I'm not in the debate on Tuesday night, so I don't have to worry about that. I worry about doing my job every day, not about evaluating everybody else's plans. Yes, Sue?
On the bill, you told the department that you wanted it to get moving right away on this. How quickly, do you know, will the investigation portion and a parent being involved, when that will take place? So you may know that.
Well, it's whatever the effective date is in the bill. That's when it'll take
There was
place.
a recent death,
I'm aware.
Dr. McCrae's son
I'm aware.
died.
And listen, by the way, we investigate those anyway.
True.
All right, so it's not like we never investigated before and now all of a sudden because of this bill we're going to investigate. It's just different time frames around it. So when the effective date of the bill takes effect for all those things, that's when they'll happen. But what I'm saying is your previous question was not on that, it was on personnel and having the personnel to be able to do those things. That they got a heads up on and authority for me to be able to begin to advertise, interview, hire, or promote.
But for more family involvement.
Listen, I believe that the Department of Human Services wants as much family involvement as they possibly can have. They're supportive of this bill. And the men and women who do this work every day, I think in the main, I guarantee there'll be probably a few exceptions found somewhere, but in the main, want the families to be involved in this. They don't want to exclude families from this. And so this legislation just further requires it, puts tighter time frames on the need for that family involvement, and I don't think there'll be anybody in Human Services who will be opposed to this or unable to perform it. So whatever the effective date is, it is, but really they understand now that this is our expectation of how people will be dealt with, and that's what we want to see happen. Other questions? Yeah, Christian.
Since you didn't talk about the tax plan, how about Lozano's audit?
I've already talked about that. I'm not going to, guys, listen. On things that I'm on the record on, like go back. I think that was Ryan, right? Ryan, didn't you write the story on that?
I didn't.
Go read Ryan. Ryan will give it to you. He's probably got it on his laptop right now. Would you email that to Christian so he can read what I've said? Because I'm not going to repeat all this stuff over and over again. As much as you guys would love me to be a candidate, and I know you would, I'm not a candidate in this race, okay? I've run for governor twice. I've won twice, which means I can't run this time. And I know that this is a race that you all have been writing that you don't find very exciting. I know I would make it much more exciting, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to be commenting on every part of this race. I'm just not. And to the extent that Ryan asked me some direct questions outside an elevator in New York, as I recall, I gave very direct answers back to him, and he very accurately relayed my comments in his story, as I recall reading it. So Ryan will email it to you, and then you can credit Politico for having gotten that for you, and you'll be in great shape. So I'm not going to continue to repeat stuff. Tired. Yes.
The Trump tax plan, do you have any thoughts about what it would mean for New Jersey on a local?
Depends on what the rates turn out to be. And it depends on whether or not it's an either or on state and local taxes or mortgage interest deduction. So there's a lot of variables in it, Sue. I think for most middle-class taxpayers, it's going to depend on what they do with the rates for middle-class taxpayers. And if the rates go down significantly, that may offset what people were able to deduct on state and local taxes. I will tell you that when I was running for president, I looked really hard at this. There are only 3 deductions that amount to anything in terms of money in the federal tax system. And that, in terms of money enough to make a difference in changing rates. It's state and local taxes, mortgage deduction, charitable deduction. Other than that, there's a lot of talk about all the other deductions, and you should close some of those loopholes in my view too, and the plan I put forward when I was running for president did, but it was a relatively small amount of money in a multi-trillion-dollar federal budget. The ones that really matter are state and local taxes, mortgage deduction, and charitable deduction. So the mix and the art in this is trying to find the sweet spot to lowering rates enough so that high tax, high expense states don't get hurt by the loss of or the reduction of the state and local tax deduction, but also you wind up lowering rates enough so that folks in the states that aren't as high taxed as ours at the state and local level still get a benefit from having it done so that you spur economic growth. So it's an art, and they're going to, believe me, whatever the Trump tax plan is now, it'll be different when it gets passed, if it gets passed, because that's just the nature of.
What would you like?
I would like something that makes sure that New Jerseyans see a benefit. That's not hard. That's what I'd like.
Among those three, I mean, what would
I don't, listen, I don't think any of them are sacrosanct, right? Depending upon what rates turn out to be. Because some people in this state, I mean, the overwhelming majority of people in the state don't itemize. Okay, so let's remember that to start with, okay? The overwhelming majority of people in this state on a federal level, even in this state, that's a very high state and local tax state, don't itemize on the federal level. So this doesn't matter to them at all. They take a standard deduction and they're done. They don't itemize their deductions. For those people who do itemize their deductions, that's where you got to see. It's the upper part of the middle class in New Jersey, which in many other states would be considered wealthy, right? But we know that a couple in New Jersey, one of whom is a teacher, the other whom is a police officer, and they make, between the two of them, $225,000 a year. They're not rich in New Jersey. A teacher who makes $100,000 a year and a police officer who makes $125,000 a year, they're not rich in New Jersey. If they were in Nebraska, they'd be rich. They're not rich in New Jersey. So when I talk about the upper middle class, I'm talking about those are the people who are the ones you got to really look at in terms of the state and local deduction. What do their rates go down, and how much does that save them, as opposed to how much do they lose from losing the state and local deduction? And that's the mix that I'm going to want to see. I'm not going to be opposed reflexively to losing the state and local deduction unless what it turns out is that the majority of New Jersey taxpayers will wind up being hurt. If that's the case in what the final bill looks like, then it's going to be harder for me to support it. But we're not even close to that yet. My guess is we won't be close to that till December or January before they finally get themselves to a point where they're voting on something that's firm. So I think I've laid out the principles. I don't oppose getting rid of state and local tax deductibility because, by the way, I don't know that the rest of the country should be subsidizing higher local and state taxes in an individual state. It's a pretty good question of whether folks in other states should be subsidizing that. When I ran for president, I didn't think we should. But my plan lowered rates enough that I thought it was going to be fair to people in New Jersey. We'll see where the plan that Congress and or the president winds up compromising on winds up being. We'll have to see. Brian, did you email that to him yet?
Not yet.
Come
I'll
on.
get it to him right
Seriously, please. He can start working on his story right now
now. It's true.
if you did that. Come on.
So I know you're not paying attention to which way the wind's blowing, but I wonder if you know what storm is coming?
No, I think there's one that's kind of blustering around down in the Caribbean now that may come up our way, but we certainly have not yet gotten to the point where I'm getting regular briefings on it. No.
Do you know what storm the president was referring to last night?
Oh, you're talking about the president's storm. There's actually a storm that's
Yeah.
that we might wind up in the cone of. I'm much more concerned. Listen, after having been the disaster governor for 8 years, I'm much more concerned about those storms than I'm concerned about whatever political storms may be coming in Washington, because those seem to blow in and out fairly quickly and fairly frequently lately. So I don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about that. No, and I have no idea what the president was talking about. I haven't spoken to the president in the last 24 hours, so I don't know what he was talking about. But if he calls me, I'll be sure you'll be my first call afterwards, so I can explain to you what the president meant by that yesterday. I have no idea. He didn't talk to me, and I have no idea what he's talking about. Anything else?
Who do you have in the World Series?
Who do I think will be in?
Yeah.
I think it'll be Indians Dodgers.
Who wins?
Indians. Cleveland's long baseball nightmare is over.
You don't have hope for the Yankees?
I don't want hope for the Yankees. I'm a Mets fan. Why would I want hope for the Yankees?
I am too. I hope
That would be like, listen, I told you the worst baseball year of my life was when I was running for governor the first time in 2009 when the Yankees were playing the Phillies in the World Series. I was hoping that they both could lose, but apparently no, someone had to win, so the Yankees wound up winning. But I think it's Indians Dodgers, and I think the Indians will avenge what happened to them last year when they were up 3-1 and blew it. And I think Cleveland's on a bit of a roll right now. Not counting the Browns. The Cavs won an NBA championship, and maybe this is finally the Indians' time. So I'm feeling good karma for the Indians. But then again, as I said before, I'm a Mets fan, so I don't know that I know much about good karma, being a Mets fan. But to the extent that I do, I'll go with the Indians and the Dodgers, and Indians to win. Anybody else? I want to thank the families that are here very much for your hard work, for you caring. As I said to you before, you have my condolences for all that you've had to go through. And we hope that what we're doing here in conjunction with the legislature will be something that will prevent, as best we can, any further suffering from other families. And I know these are emotional, difficult things. And as a parent, you have my condolences, and from both me and Mary Pat, our prayers. So, and thank all of the rest of you for being here, and have everybody have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Governor.
I was the lucky one that said, question. And in a polite way, to make you aware of what that was just the beginning. You
Okay. Just so all I want to do is know what we have for you.
and I put you on the spot. What more? You're going to tell me. What more than a net of take action? Because after 4 years, it's just going to come on. Cause any,
Now, the thing is,
you had to do this. And that was 2011. And a few weeks earlier, wanted to try and saw you at another town hall meeting. And you asked me, you said, do you know that woman Martha Craig? And I said, yeah, our sons had lived together in a group home in Bangkok. That's actually paying attention. So, so I put you on the spot, and you said that you didn't have an answer, which I respect. That you know, I respect. All right. As hard as I can. But you said, please come talk with us. And 6 years later, we have the law. So thank you. Your son's a survivor.
Excellent, good. And where's he at? Where's he at? Well, if you have some concerns, I'm sure you do. Because if I were you, I would have concerns all the time. I've got to be vigilant all the time about it. So you now have all of our information here. You should call anything you need, okay? Call our policy officer.
Thank you so much.
Give it to Bob. Bob will take it.